T-34 versus Sherman, a tale of tanks and trials in the USA. Hey there, folks. Get ready for a wild ride through history that'll grab anyone who loves tanks, World War II stories, or just a good tale about grit and innovation. We're zooming back to the 1940s, when a Soviet T-34 tank landed on American soil for a series of tests that peeled back the curtain on its strengths and flaws. This isn't just about a tank. It's about how nations, even in the chaos of war, learn from each other to build better machines. Let's dive into this epic clash of steel and ideas. How did a Soviet tank end up in America? Imagine it's June 1942. World War II is raging, and the Soviet Union is locked in a brutal fight against Nazi Germany. Meanwhile, the United States, a key ally, gets curious about the Soviet tanks holding the line on the Eastern Front. American officials reach out to the Soviets with a bold ask. They want to study some of their newest tanks up close. Why? They're hunting for ideas to make their own tanks, like the M4 Sherman, even better. The Soviets jump on it. Joseph Stalin himself gives the go-ahead to prep 6 tanks. 3 heavy KV-1s from a factory in Chelyabinsk and 3 medium T-34s from Lower Tagil. The plan? Send one of each to the USA and the United Kingdom, with the others as backups. This wasn't just about sharing. It was a chance for the Soviets to get an outsider's take on their machines, spotting flaws they might have missed in the heat of war. By late July 1942, the tanks were ready. But only 3 made the transatlantic trip. 1 T-34 and 1 KV-1 to the USA and another T-34 to the UK. The British tests came later in 1943 on an upgraded T-34, so they're not the main event. The KV-1 didn't steal the spotlight either. It was already out of production by the time it hit American soil. All eyes were on the T-34, which took center stage at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland from late November 1942 to mid-April 1943. What happened during the tests? Here's the deal. The T-34 wasn't some polished showpiece. The Soviets didn't doll it up for the Americans. They slapped on 3 layers of paint, greased the undercarriage, and sealed the hatches for the sea voyage. That's it. No fancy custom builds. That said, these T-34s had a couple of quirks. They had cast turret from 1941, which were tight but gave better visibility and rubberized wheels for a smoother ride. At Aberdeen, the Americans tore into the T-34 like mechanics at a car show. They studied every bolt, tested its performance on the move, and checked its armor, gun, engine, and welds. The 9-page report they produced was a treasure trove of insights, which Soviet intelligence snagged and sent to Stalin, the head of their tank industry, and their top tank commander. This document laid bare what the Americans thought of the T-34, good, bad, and everything in between. What did the Americans love? Let's start with the highlights. The T-34's hull shape blew the Americans away. They called it the best they'd seen on any tank, hands down. The sloped armor, which deflected enemy shells like a pro, was a stroke of genius that had U.S. engineers taking notes. The gun's sight was another winner. The Americans raved, calling it the best in the world, better than anything they had or were developing. The F-34 gun itself got props for being simple and reliable, a dream to maintain in the field. The V2 diesel engine also earned some love. Its compact size and lightweight impressed, and the Americans were all for using diesel in tanks. Unlike gasoline engines, diesels sipped fuel and were less likely to go up in flames, a big plus in combat. The T-34's wide tracks were another hit. They gave the tank awesome traction, especially on rough terrain, making it a beast in all kinds of conditions. What didn't impress? Now, the not-so-great stuff. The Americans, used to their high manufacturing standards, ripped into the T-34 for what they saw as sloppy work. Here's the breakdown. Hull and welds. The hull's shape was a star, but the welds? A total mess. The seams were so bad the tank leaked like a bucket with holes. Water poured in during river crossings and even rainstorms, frying electronics and soaking ammo. For Americans obsessed with precision, this was a deal breaker. Turret. The turret was a cramped nightmare. The Americans couldn't believe Soviet tankers, especially in bulky winter gear, could squeeze inside. The electric turret traverse was weak, sparking and burning out. The gears were flimsy and broke fast. The advice? Switch to hydraulics or stick to manual controls. Armor. The armor raised eyebrows. The Soviets used surface hardening, leaving the inner layers soft, which the Americans thought was a weak choice. They suggested a different approach could shave 10% off the weight without losing strength, boosting speed. Later tests showed they were off the mark, and their own Sherman wasn't exactly a fortress either. Gun. While the F-34 gun was reliable, its low muzzle velocity disappointed. The American M3 gun had nearly double the speed, meaning it could punch through armor from farther away. Engine and air filter. The V2 diesel was solid, but the air filter was a disaster. The Americans called it criminally bad, joking it was designed by a saboteur. It barely cleaned the air and choked the engine, cutting power and wearing out parts fast. The starter was also weak and unreliable. Transmission. The transmission took a beating. The 4-speed gearbox was outdated and tough to handle. Parts were poorly made, with gears crumbling during tests. The turning mechanism, using old-school clutches, was something the U.S. had ditched even for tractors. Verdict? Replace the whole thing. Suspension and tracks. The Christie suspension was a relic, and the Americans had long moved on. The springs, made of subpar steel, sagged, lowering the tank's clearance. The steel tracks were a cool idea, but too light and prone to breaking. The track pins wore out fast, causing frequent failures. Performance. The road tests were drama. After 14 hours and 343 kilometers, the engine died. Why? The awful air filter let in so much dirt it wrecked the pistons. Turns out, the Americans didn't clean it every 3 hours as required, or even add oil. Still, they found the T-34 slower than their tanks, though it climbed slopes like a champ. Driving it was tough, and it needed constant tweaks, demanding a driver who was part mechanic. What did this mean for the Soviets? The American report didn't shock Soviet engineers. They already knew their tank's flaws. Built in the chaos of war, with factories relocated to the Urals under pressure, the T-34's early models suffered from rush production. By 1943, things were improving. Better air filters, a 5-speed gearbox, and automated welding were rolling out. The American feedback just confirmed what the Soviets were already fixing. The bigger picture. To get why the T-34 was the way it was, let's talk context. In 1941, Germany's invasion forced the Soviets to move factories east, setting up shop in tough conditions with limited workers and materials. That's why welds were sloppy and parts were iffy. Yet, the T-34's sloped armor became a global standard, and its diesel engine kept it running longer than many rivals. By 1945, the Soviets churned out over 50,000 T-34s, outpacing the USA's roughly 49,000 Shermans. It was a numbers game, and the Soviets played it well. Economically, the T-34 was a bargain. It cost about 135,000 rubles, while a German Tiger tank ran up to 800,000 Reichsmarks. This let the Soviets replace losses fast, keeping their forces rolling. The Sherman, while reliable, wasn't cheap either, and its gasoline engine made it more vulnerable to fire. Why this matters today? This story isn't just about tanks. It's about learning from others, even in tough times. The Americans admired the T-34's design, and the Soviets used their strengths to build a legend. Today, as tech races forward, this reminds us that collaboration drives progress. From tanks to smartphones, sharing ideas sparks innovation. So what's the lesson? Even imperfect machines, built with heart and purpose, can change history. The T-34 wasn't perfect, but it helped win a war and shaped tank design for decades. Join the conversation. Love this deep dive? Subscribe to our channel for more stories about history, tech, and the people who shaped our world. Drop a comment below. Tell us what you think about the T-34 versus Sherman showdown, or share your favorite World War II tale. Let's keep the history alive together.